All right, so I like to load a churn in between centers. The last time I did a concava, I was not doing this, so this is going to be a little bit of a new thing for me with this bend kit. And one of the things I've noticed after I've loaded my bushing here on my churn between center, the one on my tailstock, I don't have a lot of this tube holder or whatever you call this part, these things that slide into your tubes. I don't have a lot of space there, so I'm hoping it's not a problem, but we're going to find out. Hopefully I can get my tailstock tight enough without breaking the blank, but enough to hold it in place. Yeah, I think that'll be okay. Now what I like to do is make sure my tailstock is locked down to my rails really well and give it just enough pressure so that it's difficult for me to churn the blank by hand on this piece here. It resists and just wants to churn with the lathe. All right, let me do that. Bring in my tool rest. I got myself set to the right speed. Put on my face protection and we'll get started. Now, I'm a big fan of the easy wood tools or the carbide cutters for churning the acrylics. They take a very light cut, they stay pretty sharp, and they make doing this project a little bit easier, especially with the acrylics, than they would with necessarily a traditional tool. The traditional tools work fine too if that's what works for you. You know, it's totally up to you. You got to do what works. But this is what I've found to be the best tool for me. This is the Easy Wood Tools, the CI3. Another thing that I do with these acrylics, I turn them full out on my lathe. So for me, that's going to be just a little over 4,000 RPM. So keep that in mind. High speed, light cuts, take your time, especially with this product here, which is a acrylester blank. All right, so let's get churning. Alright, so a couple things I want to talk about now that we're around. You should notice in the video where the chips, it went from little chippy pieces to more of little ribbons. Now you don't get big fancy long flowing ribbons with this type of product. It will always be kind of like a melty glob with this type of material, whereas like an Alumilite you're going to get a long fine ribbon. But you want to see that changeover. If you are continuing to get chips while this is round, you're pushing too hard. Another thing that you can do is you can stop periodically and you can take a look at your blank. And if you look at this blank here, you don't see any chipping or any material that's been chunked out. So we're cutting probably about where we need to be, and we will continue with that process. Now the Concava kit has an interesting thing. It's concave for the top or the cap. So we're going to want to take a look at this and think about our strategy for cutting so that it is cut deeper in the center than it is to the outside. Now what I will probably do to make that happen is I'm just going to continue going back and forth and keep this even until I start to get close to the bushings. And then what I'll do is I'll spend a little more time in the middle, starting from the middle, holding my tool there for just a little bit longer, and then moving out and moving out and moving out like this until I get my center down and my bushings down. I do have to watch and make sure I don't get too deep in the middle, because then I'll end up going down to my tube and bad things will happen. So that is the trick with this tube. Let's hope we don't have that problem, and we get a good outcome. So let's finish this up. Alright, so we're continuing to take this down, taking a pause, making sure that our cuts look clean. I do want to talk a little bit about the use of the Easy Wood tool. You need to make sure that when it is on your tool rest that you never have this black line over the tool rest. At that point, the fulcrum and the pulling of the lathe really takes a chance of pulling your tool up like this and getting in there, and nothing good's going to happen from that. The second thing is, you notice I'm kind of hanging my thumb. You may not be able to see it in the video, but I'm hanging my thumb off the end here. My hand is underneath up against the tool rest, and I'm kind of putting a light pressure down on the tool. And the purpose for that is I don't want this tool rotating. When this tool starts to rotate, that's when bad things happen. That's how you get a catch, and with an acrylic blank like that, you're just done. All right, so a couple topics of interest on the Easy Wood tools. Now we're getting to about, I don't know, maybe the last 1/8 of an inch here. So we're just going to get started and finish this up. Alright, so we've gotten to a point where I'm not comfortable going in with the tool a whole lot more, and we're going to move over to doing some sanding. Now, one of the things that I do quite often to do shaping with sandpaper is I move to a piece of 80 grit emery cloth, and this just takes off a lot. Now I'm going to slow the lathe way down. This is going to generate a lot of heat, and a lot of heat can cause cracking. And what I'm looking at here is, because this is the acrylester type of blank, it starts to get translucent as you get to the bottom here, and I'm looking to see if there's any places where I can see the tube where I might have a thin spot, and I'm not seeing that. So let me fire the lathe back up here, and we are going to finish this with some sandpaper. Alright, so I've got my concave shape here. I'll be honest with you, I'm not terribly thrilled with it, but I think that little nub from my turn between center here is allowing a fair amount of wobble, and I don't really want to work it a whole lot harder. So we're going to switch over to our sanding papers here and finish sand this and get this to where we need it to be, so that we can then wet sand it. So I'm a big fan of the Abranet strips. They look like this. This one's fairly loaded from my last Aluminite project, but they last a really long time. They work really well. They're a lot more expensive than regular sandpaper, but you go through them a lot less frequently. So I think you have a better product here. They don't generate as much heat as the finer grits do on the regular sandpapers. So for acrylics like this, and even wood for that matter, it's a better product to use. So let's do this. So this is going to run, we're going to do a 180, a 240, a 320, a 400, and then a 500. Quick passes. We're really just looking to take out these deep scratches that I put in the blank here from the 80 grit, right? Alright, so it looks like we've removed most of the deep scratches here. So we'll move on to our finish sanding. Now these are micro mesh pads. They start at 1500 grit and will go all the way up to 12,000 grit. You definitely want to use water with this process, hence me spreading out this paper towel so that I don't get water all over my lathe bed and generate a ton of rust. You don't have to spend a lot of time on each one. I spend a little more time on the first three, and then I'll go a little quicker on the others. You can turn the lathe up a little faster when you're doing this, so that you can move through it a little quicker, maybe 2500 RPM. Only reason why you can pull that off is you're adding water. Water lubricates and cools the blank so that you don't cause a whole lot of issues. All right, so you can take a look here. You can see just what this looks like, and now we're going to move into the micro mesh sanding. You'll see such a huge difference when we're done. So I've got myself a nice clean cloth here, and as you can tell, this has a beautiful shine on it, and that's just from using the micro mesh here. We're going to kick it up one notch higher, and we're going to hit this with some plastic polish, and then we'll be all done. So there's a couple brands out there that you can use that work really well. There is the Hut Ultra Gloss, which is this product here. I find this works a little better on the softer materials like Alumilite and whatnot. And then there is the One Step plastic polish. This is what I like to use on the acrylic blanks and the acrylesters. You got to use what you think works best. I feel this works best for me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the lathe on. I'm going to put a little bit of this on my finger. I'm going to rub it in just a little bit, and then I'm going to buff it out with a cloth, and we're going to call it a day for this top part of this blank. Alright, so we've got ourselves a really beautiful shiny blank that's going to look really nice on that pen. Now, one of the things you noticed as I was pulling off the plastic polish, getting this black stuff. This black stuff is coming from actually polishing my bushings. And if you noticed, I keep going through until I polish the blank, or I rub the blank, and I get very little. You know, obviously any dirt that's on here is going to impede the optical luster of this. So that's it. So that is the top part of our Concava pen kit. We got a little bit of a concave shape here. Well, probably could have done a little more, but with this wobble I was having down here at the end, I was really uncomfortable going a lot deeper. Nonetheless, it's going to have a great outcome. You know, you could spend more time here and dig this out a little deeper and feather it up. You could use a different tool to maybe dig in a little deeper here. You know, part of it's just playing with it and getting to know. So we're going to turn this off. I am going to turn the bottom half, which is nothing spectacular, so I'll spare the video for that, and then we'll do the pen assembly.